Only 10 decks for Lent. That was the challenge. I saw this video by Syvlan over at Sylvan's Deadly Sins on March 2nd, which was the beginning of Lent. And I thought, 40 days, 10 decks, I can do it. I looked at my collection. I gathered up 10 decks that would correspond to some of the things that I needed in order to meet the challenge during this time. So that included new moons, full moons, spring equinox, all the things. I went through and looked at all the things to find out which decks would allow me to get through this time period of 40 days. Now let's find out how I actually did. Okay, so the Dark Goddess Tarot was on the list, Intuitive Night Goddess, Our Tarot, Story Medicine Tarot, Baba Yaga Soup, Shimmering Veil Tarot, Tarot Avataria, the Gentle Tarot, and the Super Lunaris Tarot. And my thought was, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and move this basket, and I'll explain this basket in just a moment. My thought at this time, or at the time that I recorded the video, was that I would use the 10 decks and then supplement some oracle decks, you know, and so, yeah, it would be over the 10 technically. But then when I got to work on it, on like day 3, I thought, you know what? This isn't right. This isn't fair. This is a surrender. This is a time for surrender and pulling back on things that I would ordinarily use. I went ahead and scaled it back to 10. Let's see what I used and what I didn't use. So the Dark Goddess Tarot is one that I decided I would use. I was going to use the Dark Goddess and the Intuitive Night Goddess Tarot, but with me rethinking the challenge and thinking, wait a minute, Annette, you need to have only 10, I went ahead and pared it down to one deck that I could use for my moon ceremonies, and also this would provide what I needed for the month ahead spread, because one of these cards, if you really dig into just one of these cards, you can really focus in on that energy. Now another deck, as I'm going through this, another deck that I went ahead and took off the list and didn't work with after all was the Story Medicine Tarot Baba Yaga Soup, because it would have required a little bit more attention than I had the time for. And we have the card right here. So if I wanted to dig in a little bit, I would just kind of dig into that story and read the book that I had and then work with that deck at another time, because I had so many things that I had to accomplish during this time. So this was one of the decks that I went ahead and decided to use. Our Tarot. I did use Our Tarot because it was Women's History Month, and this little deck did provide a lot of interesting facts and information about these beautiful, powerful women who did change things in so many ways for us. I did go ahead and use this deck, and this is really a nice deck. This was a good deal. I picked this up at Marshall's, of all places. I went in one day and they had it there, and I had kind of been thinking about it, but when I saw it at Marshall's, it was a great deal, so I went ahead and picked it up. But this was another one that I used during this time. So Shimmering Veil Tarot was one deck that I thought that I would use for the spring equinox. But during the spring equinox, we ended up going out of town to Tucson, and I thought, you know what, I don't want to have a very expensive deck with me. I just want to have one deck that I can replace easily in case something happens. That's not always my thoughts. I don't know why I had that in my head during this trip, but I went ahead and just took the Tarot de Luz. It's just a nice little compact deck, and I had not used it yet. I was kind of waiting for this time of year to use this deck, and I have to say that I really did enjoy using this deck. It is just so sweet. The images are just adorable. Like, this could have been one that I would have used for a VR to my adorable decks, because this is absolutely adorable. It has a nice little guidebook, but anyways, I'm not here to review the deck. I'm just going through the images here. Tarot Avataria. You know, I absolutely love Frida, and I love this deck. So this deck did stay on my my challenge, my deck challenge. because there's so many emotions in this deck, and it is a Thoth-based deck. So I thought I want to keep up the work of, you know, indirectly, just like Thoth type meanings and stuff. And I could easily do it using this deck. So I did keep my Tarot Avataria in the mix. Now, this might surprise everybody, but the decks that I didn't include were the Gentle Tarot and the Super Lunaris. Now, if you've been listening to me for any length of time, you will know that the Gentle Tarot is always nearby. I have one on my bedside, then I have the regular size one. I ordered the tin version of it, but something was very apparent to me as I got into this challenge, and that was that it was going to be the Aztec New Year, or the Mexica New Year. So in order to bring in the new year, I went ahead and brought in the Tarot Yohali Iteca, which is my Mesoamerican deck. I could not have brought in the new year without this deck. I mean, this deck is exactly what, you know, that time is all about. So I went ahead and brought in this deck. And then also I was reading a book, and it was just so fitting to be using this deck during this time. Now, the Jade Oracle, I went ahead and brought this deck out, not to use it per se, but just to hold the rabbit card in front of me, because it is the year of the rabbit. So I just wanted to work with that energy and was just really holding it as like a placeholder for that energy. And see, now that I'm going through it, I can't find the rabbit card. So that was my intention when bringing out this deck, is that I would just use it to show the rabbit card. So let me see. Oh, there it is. So that I could just hold that energy for that ceremony. During this time, I got in this deck as well. This was one of the decks that I was waiting for, and I was very anxious to work with this deck. So this is the Crimson Asteria Tarot, and I have to say that I just kind of really fell for this deck during this time. I really like this deck. I kind of went deep and looking into the mythological tales of Asteria and Hecate, and I really kind of dug into it. And because of that extra work that I did with the background of Asteria, I really got into this deck. I really like this deck. So I'm glad that I included this. I was watching a video right at the end of March with Simon of the Hermit's Cave, and he had Candy on his channel, and they were speaking, and she used this deck alongside the Seed and Sickle Oracle. Well, we're in spring at this point, and I thought, oh my goodness, I never thought of matching those two up, of pairing those two decks up, and I loved the way that they looked. So I went ahead and replaced a couple other decks that I had on my list to use the Seed and Sickle alongside the Witch's Wisdom Tarot. And I love the way that these two work together. They play so well together. You've got the floral and fauna here, and then you have a lot of people within the Witch's Wisdom. There is some flora and fauna, of course, but there's a lot of people within this deck. So these two, oh my goodness, this is now one of my all-time favorite pairings. So thank you so much, Candy. Now also, I was watching Lisa Pepez, and she stated that she did much better just using the Dusk guidebook. It comes with two guidebooks, the Dawn and the Dusk. I just dug into the Dusk guidebook, and I have to say that I really enjoy working with the deck in that capacity with the Dusk guidebook. It works really, really well. So paring it down to only the 10, I went ahead and thought, okay, I need to just limit the oracle decks that I have. I was already using these two decks, and so my last oracle deck that I was bringing in was the Seed and Sickle. So Threads of Fate really does match a lot of the decks that I have, matches the energy. And to me, I've said this before, I believe that this is really a very shamanic style deck. There's a lot of that energy woven through the deck itself and then within the guidebook, the way that it's created and written. So I went ahead and had the Threads of Fate as one of my oracle decks. Now the Vessel Oracle is an oracle deck that I had already ordered. It was on its way to me, and I thought that it would pair up very nicely with the Crimson Asteria, which it did. But it also paired up very nicely with the Tarot de Luz and also our tarot. And I believe, yes, I even used it with the Tarot Avataria. But this deck is so cute. I really, really like it. It's just one little word. You can use the guidebook or not use the guidebook. It's totally up to you, but this deck came in really handy. So these two decks are kind of like, they really did fit, as well as matching the energy of a lot of the decks that I had available and that I was using. So how did I do? So I used a total of 3 oracles, and I used a total of 7 tarot decks. Was it easy? Oh, heck no. You know what? I was losing it a few times with having only 10 decks available to me. This was really, really a hard thing for me to do. Now, I know that I heard other people saying that from this challenge, they were really able to pare down their collection and they decided that they didn't need that many decks. You know what it did for me? It made me really appreciate my collection and the decks that I have. I use Mayan astrology every single day. I look at the energy of the day and I use that to kind of guide me with which deck I'll be using, or if I kind of look at, like on Sunday, at the overall energy of the week. During these 40 days, I didn't have that choice. I had to stick to these decks. And it was hard. It was really, really hard. Not having the Gentle Tarot, I decided that if I needed it, I would go and get it. But I didn't. I stuck with these decks. I really tuned in. It did really give me the chance to like really get to know the Crimson Asteria and then really utilize the Tarot de Luz and get to know it. So the decks that I did use, I was able to kind of hone into a little bit more, which was part of my intention. Like I said before, if I had to do it, if somebody came and took away all of these tools, you know what, seriously, you don't need any of them when it comes right down to it, but I have them and I'm going to use them. I like my tools. I have a whole chest full of crystals. Each crystal offers a different energy. So like this copper Merkabah offers different energy than this Fenster window quartz. Whoops, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. And then this rose quartz offers a different energy as well. Everything is different. So these decks, to me, carry a different type of energy. Each one of them is different. They're like your children. Just because they're in the same family doesn't mean that they're the same. I appreciate all the decks in my collection. And during this time, I did go through my decks and think about which decks do I really not use. And I did pare down a few decks that I am going to put or add to the purgatory box. I did give a few decks to my daughters as well, but I'm not by all means, like this is not a mean to call my collection. This is not, this is not where this particular challenge led me. And the only way that I could stay on track, to be honest, was using this basket. Because what I did, as you could see at the beginning of the video, I loaded all of my decks in to the basket. If it was in the basket, it could be used. I did it. I did the 10 decks only challenge. I did. Was it easy? Absolutely not. It was horrible. And there were days when I just thought, I cannot do this. Like, I really don't want to do this anymore. This isn't fun. I don't like it. And it wasn't fun. And I didn't like it, but I did do it. Would I do it again? To be honest, I don't really know. I'm not quite sure. I'll have to see where I'm at next year. Maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. But you know what? I really like the energy of all the decks, the way that they're different, the different meanings that they have for me, how I interpret the cards differently. I like my decks. I'm keeping my decks. I'm not throwing anything out as a result of this particular challenge, but I do appreciate that I was able to focus in more on the decks at hand. I might consider just like looking at a certain amount of decks for a certain period of time, but never, never doing like this, 10 decks for 40 days. It was a long time using only 10 decks. That being said, that is it, guys. I made it. I did it. I am so glad it's over. And I can tell you that on the 15th of April, I'm not joking, I brought out like maybe 8 decks and started just working with a bunch of decks that I had not had the chance to work with during those 40 days. And I was just utilizing them, touching them, shuffling them. I needed to touch every one of them. So, you guys, thank you so much. Sylvain, thank you so much for this challenge. It was an interesting challenge. I'm glad that I did it. I did like the idea of just, like I said, just honing into the decks that I have in front of me and just getting to know these decks a little bit better. It was good for that. But I'm not getting rid of a darn thing. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys watching and coming along with me during this challenge. I wish you nothing but peace, love, and happiness. From my heart to yours, have a wonderful day. I will see you later.